The wreckage of their battle mechs stained the dusty air with greasy black smoke from ruined engines and shattered gyros. Standing over them was a Crusader. The mech was painted light gray. On its chest was a white sword overlaid on a gold shield. Over the numeral 22, the insignia of the 22nd Avalon Hussars. Neck saw, off to the right, at least a lance of enemy mechs vanishing into the dust cloud. As Neck prepared to charge, the Crusader did the last thing Neck ever expected. The Crusader's head twisted slightly to the left and up, as though considering the catapult that had stumbled upon it. It straightened its arms down to its sides, then it bowed. Neck gaped in amazement. The enemy mech bent at the waist to nearly 90 degrees, the warrior within keeping Neck in view through the canted head. The Crusader slowly straightened back to vertical. Neck stepped forward slowly, stopping 50 meters from his enemy. He turned to face the Crusader directly. He moved his left foot forward and tipped his pointed nose toward the ground, holding the pose for a beat longer than the enemy had. He keyed his comm to an open channel, hoping his enemy was listening. "I am Dai Brennick Mayo. I have sought you my entire life." The story of the Crusader begins before the outbreak of the Reunification War. The conflict between the fledgling Star League and the periphery states would be the legendary battlemechs forging fire. Following the brutal and horrifying Bloody Santiago incident in December of 2572, and the Mar La Grata crisis on the border between the Federated Suns and the Tauren Concordat, the great houses largely put aside their rivalry to focus on what the Star League propaganda machines insisted was an urgent outside threat. The siblings were done fighting for now, and it was decided that the fledgling periphery states were due for a beating. Word of impending war made the gigantic military-industrial corporations of the Inner Sphere giddy. While business had been good since the development of the first battle mechs, the prospect of seeing those mechs used and eventually needing repair and replacement was enough to make them downright patriotic. By the beginning of the Reunification War, scores, if not hundreds, of a handful of different battle mech, tank, and fighter designs were rolling off production lines on a monthly basis. Literally thousands of Stingers, Phoenix Hawks, Shadowhawks, Crusaders, Warhammers, Banshees, and Victors would be constructed during the war, but of course, those alone would not be enough. Heavy losses would require the SLDF to contract for other standby designs, while newly designed Highlanders, Lancelots, Pillagers, and Stalkers would also be purchased by the shipload. Roughly 270 regiments of tanks, mechs, and infantry made up from former Terran hegemony forces, and roughly a quarter of each Great House military headed off to face down the troublesome periphery states, which just seemed incapable of towing the line and doing what they were told. Though the Crusader would not see its first deployment until near the end of the war, it would quickly prove its mettle and become a favorite mech within the SLDF, as well as the military units of the Great Houses. Through both a lack of good record-keeping and the fog of history, the original loadout of the Crusader CRD-1R isn't known for sure. However, we do know that its loadout was described as similar to the much more commonly known CRD-3R Crusader, which became a staple of militaries across the Inner Sphere. The CRD-3R Crusader was first produced by Callan Industries, which had a long history of producing other high-quality military equipment. This included the Rifleman, Wolverine, and Partisan heavy tank. Weighing in at 65 tons, the Crusader was often confused with heavier battle mechs during its early years due to its bulky profile. Partially, this was due to engineering requirements, but it only rarely hurts to be seen as tougher than you actually are. The Crusader was conceived as a tough and easy-to-maintain battle mech that could fill a wide variety of roles from command mech to frontline brawler. The positive reports from those first deployments during the last few years of the Reunification War prove that it was successful across the board. Though not without its flaws, the Crusader was, to many, pretty darn close to the ideal 65-ton battle mech. Thousands of Crusaders were produced by Callan and licensee manufacturers over the course of the next 2 centuries, and it became one of the most commonly seen heavy battle mechs across the Inner Sphere. It was found in every Great House military and even had a home in the Rimworld's forces and other periphery nations. Built around a Magna 260 fusion engine, the Crusader could reach a top speed of 64 km per hour. That 460 movement profile was typical for most mechs in the heavyweight class. The 3R carried 10 standard heatsinks and 12 tons of Reese 500 standard plate armor. While the report does discuss the legs being up-armored to facilitate kicking attacks, the overall leg armor distribution isn't significantly more than would be expected. The Crusader's two Magna Longbow LRM-15 launchers split between the left and right arms provided a significant punch at long and mid-range, yet there was no respite for those who thought they could close in for a short-range fight. Closing in on a target, the Crusader could bring in its two SRM-6s located in hip mounts on each leg. The left and right arms each carried a medium laser and a machine gun. At 6 hexes, firing everything except for the machine guns, the possible damage was 64 if all the missiles hit. That's pretty impressive, though not something to be done very often, as that would leave the mech 14 heat into the red if standing, 16 at a run. However, if you wanted to settle a disagreement quickly, it was nice to have that kind of option. The Crusader 3R's biggest drawbacks, other than not having jump jets, are both found in the reliance upon ammunition-based weaponry. Each LRM-15 is fed by just a single ton of ammunition, which is just 8 shots. The location of that ammunition in the left and right torsos is a vulnerability, as the 3R lacks any other critical items in those torsos. A single critical hit to either side torso is guaranteed to set off any remaining ammunition, likely causing catastrophic damage to the battlemech. The SRM-6s are fed by a single ton of ammunition, which also limits the shots to 15 total, and they're stored in the center torso, a notoriously fun place to put explosive things. Thankfully, that single ton of machine gun ammunition is stored in the... Oh, okay, that's in the center torso too. Okay, so the risk versus reward personal debate is going to come into play when dealing with the Crusader 3R. For those bold mech warriors who are prepared to gamble that they can burn down an enemy before their own armor fails and they go up like a Roman candle, well, the 3R could be a solid pick. As one, we fell on the trebuchet, our nearest target. My lasers flashed and flayed and armor streamed away from our enemy. Spear's Griffin matched my beams of light and added a volley of long-range missiles. Sing's new Crusader upgrade more than doubled the barrage of LRMs, then hammered with short-range missiles, heavier with heavier warheads, as we closed the gap. Driftwood's scintillating beams of light found something deep in the OP-4 mech's chest and touched off the ammunition stored there. The trebuchet blossomed into a simulated fireball. Early variants of the Crusader tended to focus on increasing the number of heatsinks. Just 1 year following the 3R's first production, the 3L variant sought to create a more balanced and agile Crusader. The movement profile was improved to 464 with the addition of jump jets, and 2 additional heatsinks were added to the mech. These quality-of-life additions were paid for by cutting the LRM-15s to LRM-10s and the SRM-6s to SRM-4s. Inadvertently, the addition of jump jets to the left and right torso also helped a bit with the vulnerable ammo bins, making every single critical hit just a 1 in 3 chance of setting off those LRMs. Overall, the Crusader 3L is a more balanced take on the mech, and one which may be more forgiving for new mech warriors. The jump jets are a welcome addition to a mech that is known to be rough and tumble. Personally, I'm more of a fan of the 3L than the 3R. The Crusader 3D, which started showing up in 2756, takes another route, pulling the machine guns and their ammunition as well as dropping the SRM launchers to SRM-4s. This bought enough mass for the addition of 4 additional heatsinks which were placed into the side torsos, again helping with the critical hit vulnerability. While it lacks the jump jets of the 3L, it preserves the LRM-15s, which is nice if you're keen on keeping storms of long-range missiles raining down on targets. Of course, if you favor SRMs over LRMs, but want to keep the same sort of variant, the Crusader 3K is there for you. This Draconis Combine variant downgraded the LRM-15s to LRM-10s, pulled the machine guns, and added 6 additional heatsinks. Preserving the SRM-6s retained the 3K's potency at short range. I tend to group these 4 Crusaders as the originals, as they're all kind of just slight variations of each other. By the 4th Succession War, the Crusader was being produced all over the Inner Sphere, and there were plenty of different variants. As we approach what are known as the Helm Memory Core upgrades, there are 5 more variants which could lay claim to that title. One of them, the CRD-5M, was considered the Free Worlds League version, and it benefited from a variety of new technological bells and whistles. The installation of a Hermes 260 XL fusion engine bought mass for use elsewhere at the cost of making the mech slightly more vulnerable. Though remember, these locations weren't particularly safe to begin with in earlier variants. 13 double heat sinks address the mech's heat issues, and 4 Chilton 465 jump jets shift that movement profile to 464. The mech's 12 tons of standard plate weren't touched. One thing that I appreciate about the Crusader 5M is that the designers didn't fall into the temptation, as with so many other helm upgrade mechs, to completely nullify the benefit of those double heatsinks by slapping on an ER-PPC or ER-large laser. Credit where credit is due, thank you for showing some restraint. The two arm-mounted LRM-15s were left alone, but the SRM launchers were swapped with a pair of Streak SRM-2 launchers. The two medium lasers were left as they were, along with one of the machine guns. Strangely, the other machine gun in the right arm mount was replaced with a flamer, and an anti-missile system was installed in the open head critical location. Finally, in one of the best pieces of news for our friend the Crusader, case was installed in both the left and right torso to protect the ammunition for the missile launchers, the machine gun, and the anti-missile system. Overall, the Crusader 5M's value is likely going to depend on how you feel about that XL engine. The double heat sinks are great for largely solving the heat issues for the mech, and the case reduced the pain of those ammo crits. The jump jets are great to have, but all of these quality of life upgrades depend on those additional 3 critical engine slots in the left and right torsos. So is the XL worth it? I don't know, it's up to you. Traditionally, the Combine used the Crusader 3K, so when the time came for an upgrade in 3049, the 3K was their foundation. The variant that took on the 4K mantle saw the modest upgrade of the 2 arm-mounted medium lasers to pulse laser variety at the cost of 2 of the single heatsinks. This change did improve the Crusader's accuracy at short range, though the heat issues of the 3 Series variants persisted without the upgrade to double heatsinks. Overall, the Combine's upgrade is pretty meh. The leap from Crusader 3L to 4L was more substantial, though it did resist the urge to add that XL engine. All of the weapons were changed out, but the loadout is familiar. The LRM-10s were upgraded back to 15s in the arms, and the SRM-4s were swapped out for a pair of Streak SRM-2s. Finally, the 2 standard medium lasers were swapped out for a pair of medium pulse lasers. All of these were cooled by just 13 single heatsinks, which was an issue as a full Alpha Strike could run the 4L up to +9 heat standing still if both streaks locked on and fired. These early Crusader variants were deployed across the inner sphere and showed up time and time again in battle reports. Even with its flaws, the Crusader was beloved by battlefield commanders and feared by anyone who had to face one in battle. In 3020, during the Battle of Kindru's Crossing on Amity, a company of Lyran forces, primarily consisting of Crusaders, smashed into a company of Merrick Regulan Hussars who were piloting Marauders and Warhammers. Though the Lyrans were outgunned, they were able to fall back in good order and rain down LRMs on the Merrick mechs, while the Marauders and Warhammers suffered from overheating issues returning fire with their PPCs. Even though both sides of the fight suffered significant damage, it was reported that the Lyran Crusaders were repaired and refitted within 24 hours. Tiptoeing down the timeline a bit, we're not going to hit every variant because, like with so many other 3025 TRO era mechs, there are a lot of them, and I don't want this video to be 2 hours long. However, we are going to hit upon some interesting variants that stand out or have interesting backstories. The Crusader 6T, first spotted in 3053, is a great example of a departure from the previous Crusader loadouts and a reminder that imitation is a form of flattery. The installation of a 325 XL engine and jump jets boosted the 6T's movement profile to 585. In addition to the 12.5 tons of standard armor, 17 double heatsinks were added to try to deal with the heat generated from this energy weapon heavy loadout. Not 2, but 12 standard medium lasers were split between the left and right arms in what had to be borrowed from the infamous Nova Prime configuration. 2 flamers were also added to the traditional leg-hip locations for those times when you needed to barbecue something soft and squishy. Finally, a C3S unit was added so that the Crusader could share its targeting data with others. Even with my notoriously limited math skills, it's easy to see that the Crusader 6T would be a potentially nasty customer at short range, which it can easily reach thanks to that 585 movement profile. However, much like the Nova, heat is the limiting factor. Firing all 12 medium lasers at a run would leave the Crusader 6T at 4+ into the red. While that's not terrible, in the case where the mech jumps at its full 5 hexes instead of running, it would be at a +7. Again, not absolutely horrifying like with the Nova, but still worth considering if you want to create a hunter-killer out of the Crusader 6T. It's an interesting loadout for a mech normally known for its missile launchers. In 3066, the Crusader received a massive ballistics weapon upgrade with the installation of a heavy Gauss rifle into the left torso. Able to do 10 damage at 20 hexes, 20 damage at 13 hexes, and 25 damage at the short range of just 6 hexes, the heavy Gauss rifle is an absolutely terrifying close-range weapon. In order to fit the 18-ton rifle onto the mech along with its 2 tons of ammunition, an XL engine was necessary, as well as splitting the heavy Gauss across both the left torso and the 2 open center torso critical locations. It's not often that you see a Gauss rifle split into the center torso. Something to keep in mind is that a critical hit to either of those heavy Gauss locations in the center torso would mean that all 25 damage would hit that center torso location. If it was a through armor critical on an otherwise unblemished 8S, there would be no armor left on the previously undamaged center torso. The LRMs in the left and right arms had to be cut to LRM 10s, but the 2 standard medium lasers were left alone. The mech's movement profile is 464, and it's a good thing that those jump jets were added so that the Crusader could close quickly on its opponents no matter the terrain challenges. The 8S's 10 double heat sinks are more than enough to handle the mech's loadout, and overall, anything carrying a heavy Gauss rifle has to be a concern. Few battle mechs can easily handle 25 points of concentrated damage, especially if a few LRM launches have hit in previous turns. The drawbacks of the 8S are the 2 tons of ammunition for the Gauss rifle, which only allows 8 shots, and the Gauss rifle itself with its tendency to explode when hit. However, if you're happy living on the edge of victory and exploding into little bits, the 8S could be a good wildcard option for your Crusader. As the target moved out of cover, Rose could see the Dragoon's Crusader return fire, its left torso gouged with simulated laser damage. 2 flights of LRMs flew to the roof as Angus also targeted the mech. The LRMs exploded around Rihanna's Phoenix Hawk, sending chunks of armor into the street below. Her mech staggered, but Rihanna quickly brought it under control, jumping off the roof just as the second warrior filled the air with charged electrons. In 3083, Republic of the Sphere forces began to file reports of a new Capellan configuration of the Crusader, which was upturning the table in fights that should have been easy wins for the RAF. As the details piled up on this old mech presenting a new threat, it was clear that the Crusader was a perfect candidate for a wide variety of new weapon systems. The Crusader 8L looked very different from its earlier Crusader iterations, not just from loadout and internals, but also from a completely reconfigured outer structure and armor placement. Let's take a look at what is under the hood of this thing. Built around a 325 XL fusion engine and an endo-steel frame, the 8L was already taking advantage of several important mass-saving technologies. 11.5 tons of standard plate kept the mech safe, and the 10 double heatsinks were destined to get a workout. Staying true to form, the left and right arms were where most of the weapons were placed on the battle mech. Each arm featured a multi-missile 7 launcher with an ER medium laser and a plasma rifle. Each MML launcher has 2 tons of missiles stored in the nearest side torso along with case. The plasma rifles had 30 rounds total with which to play. Now you might be thinking, MechFrog, you only picked this battle mech because it carries 2 plasma rifles. And if you're thinking that, you'd be largely correct. Good job developing those solid pattern recognition skills. More seriously, the Crusader 8L packs a solid punch at all ranges, but really excels in mid and short range, where it can pummel a foe with up to 14 SRMs per turn while hammering its target with plasma rifle shots. Fans of McCarran's armored cavalry will be happy to hear that they were a primary recipient of the Crusader 8L. The Dow Mechworks on sticks provided the variant in great numbers, and it was seen among Capellan units and among the forces of the Magistracy of Canopus. The 8L's drawbacks include the drop in long-range power down to just 2 flights of 7 LRMs and the 10 double heat sinks, which were inadequate for sustained fire by the mech's 4 most powerful weapons. Leaving the ER medium lasers out of the mix and firing the 2 plasma rifles along with the 2 MMLs will net the mech 8+ into the red at the end of the turn while standing still. Leaving out a plasma rifle and firing the 2 ER medium lasers instead produces that same result. Unfortunately, there aren't many ways to fire most of the weapons each turn without going painfully into the red on the heat scale. It's one of those mechs that is just slightly too overgunned to feel like you're getting as much out of it as you want. If I were in the position to tweak it, I think I would drop one of the ER medium lasers in exchange for an additional heatsink. While it wouldn't completely solve the heat issues, it would drop that +8 to a +6 on the heat table, which is slightly more manageable. An even more substantial refit could drop those MML7s to MML5s, which would buy 3 tons, which would be spent pushing that total cooling per turn to 26. Even with the drop in number of missiles fired each turn, this change would allow the missile launchers to be fired more often with the 2 plasma rifles, improving the damage possible over time. But perhaps it's best to move on. In 3087, the Crusader 7M was first spotted, and I think it's worth talking about because it's a good example of how the light PPC can be employed as essentially a long-range medium laser. 5 damage for 5 heat, out to 18 hexes. 7M swaps their traditional medium lasers in the arms for a pair of those light PPCs, and I think it ends up doing the mech a service. Sporting an XL engine and 4 jump jets, the Crusader's movement profile is 464, and once again it has 10 double heat sinks which will be put to work quite heavily. The Crusader 7M's primary weapons have to be considered those twin MML7s, which are found in the left and right arms. Being able to fire LRMs and SRMs on the fly makes the mech a threat at all ranges, though admittedly more powerful in the shorter range than in the long distance. Additionally, the 7M's MMLs are aided by an Artemis IV fire control system. The previously mentioned 2 light PPCs back up the MMLs at long and medium ranges, and in the short range, twin Streak SRM4s can pack a wallop if they can achieve their locks. Finally, an anti-missile system located in the head can keep the brave Crusader pilot alive for a bit longer in the field. The ammunition for the 7M's missile launchers were placed into the left and right torsos along with Case 2, nullifying the worry that usually comes with piloting a Crusader. While not as egregious as the 8L, heat is an issue for the Crusader 7M. Firing just the MMLs and the Streak SRM launchers is fine, and just the light PPCs with the MMLs work, but if you're leaping the full 4 hexes and trying to do more than 4 of the 6 weapons, heat management will be necessary. A full alpha strike at 3 hexes would put the 7M at 4+ heat at a standstill and 6+ at a run. It's workable in the moment when you want to make sure the target goes down quickly. At a possible 54 damage if all the missiles hit, the Crusader 7M could end a disagreement quickly. In 3096, Callan Industries went back to basics with the Crusader 8R variant, which took advantage of some newer tech, but also sought to regain the balance between the LRM and SRM without having to resort to multi-missile launchers. The 8R has a standard frame, a Hermes 260 Fusion XL engine, and takes advantage of 12 tons of Callan's Free Worlds League special light ferrofibers armor. The mech's 10 double heat sinks would be tested. The classic 2 LRM-15s in the arms make their return, though this time they are joined by ER medium lasers instead of the standards. Each LRM-15 is aided by an Artemis IV fire control system to make those missiles count. The leg missiles return to form with the 2 Streak SRM-6s. Even the classic 3Rs machine guns return to help gun down those soft and annoying infantry. All of the ammunition for those various weapons is placed into the right and left torsos along with Case 2. It's interesting to see the 8R as a return to the original, but also with so many quality of life upgrades thanks to new technology. Heat can be an issue, but being able to fire 4 out of the 6 main weapons every turn without going into the red is solid. The 8R does have that XL engine, which is a bit of a risk, but overall it's definitely a better machine than the original 3R. If you're playing this far forward in the timeline, check out the Crusader 8R. The last official variant we're going to cover today comes to us from the Brigadier Corporation's factory on Oliver. In a build that seems deliberately destined to annoy me, they decided to add a 325 XXL Fusion engine to the mech, known for brawling. Sure, it has 12 tons of standard armor, 12 double heat sinks, and a 580 movement profile, but that XXL engine requires 6 critical slots in the center torso, along with 6 on each of the side torsos. Okay, maybe it's not so bad. Hopefully that XXL engine bought enough mass for some excellent weaponry. Okay, maybe not. The 9R Crusader carries the very familiar loadout of 2 LRM-15s, 2 SRM-6s, and 2 machine guns, though the standard medium lasers were replaced by 2 light PPCs. All of the ammunition for the mech is stored in the right torso along with Case 2. In the interest of being concise but blunt, I strongly dislike this variant. It is objectively worse than the original 3R variant because it's just as vulnerable to critical hits, yet costs 52 million C-bills in the face of the 3R's 5.7 million C-bills. You could purchase 2 full lances of Crusader 3Rs and still have enough left over to cover the mechs in gold leaf and get the deluxe leather cockpit upgrade. If there is an Instagram equivalent in the 32nd century, the Crusader 9R is what those investment gurus rent for an afternoon to trick followers into believing that they're wealthy. Unless money has no object and you're bad at making decisions, you can pass on the Crusader 9R. Moving on from that unpleasantness, I did decide to take a crack at creating an MF upgrade to the Crusader. Since the mech largely avoided the clan tech bat in various post-invasion upgrades, I figured I'd sprinkle in a little bit to see what would happen. The Crusader 3MF benefits from clan endo steel and 11 tons of clan ferrofibers armor. Its light fusion engine and 5 jump jets push the movement profile to 585. It's served by 12 inner sphere double heatsinks. The weapons loadout will look familiar for fans of the classic, as they are 2 LRM-15s located in the left and right arms. However, these are both clan tech. They are joined by a couple of inner sphere ER medium lasers. In the left and right leg, to stay true to the iconic form, I've added 2 advanced tactical missile 3 launchers. Finally, an inner sphere ER small laser sits in the head should it be cold outside and you need to keep your coffee warm in your cockpit. Each LRM-15 is fed with 1 ton of ammunition apiece, located in the side torsos. The ATM ammunition, 3 tons total, is split between 2 for the left torso and 1 for the right. Both side torsos are protected by Case 2. Overall, the Crusader 3MF is useful at all ranges, has near the max possible armor, and walks the line between risk and reward with the use of missiles and the light fusion engine. The mech is pricey at just over 12 million C-bills, but you can still buy 4 of them before you approach the price of the blighted Crusader 9R. Before we wrap things up, I do want to highlight a specific Crusader which became famous due to its rather important owner, Galen Cox. By the time that Galen came into possession of the antique Crusader, he was well on his way to becoming a legend. The man and the machine he nicknamed Stormcloud made the holovids when Galen fought on Twycross against the Jade Falcons. Fighting off heavier and better armed battlemechs, Stormcloud was battered but not broken by the clan invaders. The Thor swung its PPC arm in Victor's direction, but never managed a shot. Sending 2 flights of SRMs from the leg-mounted launchers of his Crusader, Galen Cox pummeled the Thor's arm. SRM explosions blasted shards of armor deeper into the dim cave, and more important, knocked the gunnery pod wide of its target. Once again, the Raiders' PPC shot missed the Victor. Later, Stormcloud would benefit from the upgraded package to a 5M status, and Galen would continue to use it against the enemies of the Federated Commonwealth. Through battles against the clans and even bouts on Solaris 7, Stormcloud would endure. It would even survive longer than Galen Cox himself. So why do we love the Crusader? This is an interesting one because on paper, the over-reliance upon the paltry amount of ammunition should call into question the Crusader's effectiveness. It definitely has an iconic and imposing look that goes a long way, and the argument can always be made that you only need as much ammo as is necessary to win. Otherwise, you're just wasting space. The Crusader has some really great variants and acts as a good testbed for new technologies. Some could benefit from a tweak here and there, but overall there's always something new and interesting to offer as you march down the timeline. I cherish my Ral Partha Crusader as one of the old classics that has aged well. The new CGL look is pretty solid as well. From the battlefields of the Reunification War to the last days of the Republic of the Sphere, the Crusader has been there to witness the sands of history shift and fall. There are no signs that this iconic battlemech is fading in the eyes of mech warriors or fans of BattleTech. Do you have a Crusader tabletop story to share? Is there a favorite variant that I missed? Let me know in the comments so I can promptly refuse to apologize for leaving it out. Thank you as always for coming by today as I ramble on about this mech or that. If you felt it was worthy, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button so you're more likely to see additional nonsense from me in the future. For the folk up on the screen right now, thank you for going that extra step by directly supporting the channel. None of this is possible without you. And one more little special shout out. Today I went down to the friendly local game store and met a really cool BattleTech fan named Jacob. I want to say thanks for being so friendly, and I look forward to blowing your mechs up soon. Until we meet again, take care and go make the world a slightly better place today and tomorrow.